Ahoy! Or more like, oh boy. Because New World messed up big time today. We've had some issues here and there in the past, in the recent month, but I think this one knocks most of them out of the park. If you log into the game right now, then you may not be seeing it anymore, but earlier today things were shuffled up in a way that deeply affects the game in other places now too. Because a few hours ago, the server list looked like this. Almost all of the server labels were removed. The only exception, I think, were the console servers, which would still not show up. But no fresh start, no PvP server, no other labels that would affect anything. And this was not just a lack of labels, this actually affected everything about the servers. Now, I personally didn't make any major moves, even though I was very tempted to do it, but I wanted to test how this played out, and I used an old character that I had that was a very low-level character that I just never got around to playing, which was without a world, which had the select world option, which is essentially functioning the same as a server transfer, only that it doesn't use a token. With this character, I was able to transfer to any world, including the new PvP seasonal world, because it wasn't labeled as a PvP seasonal world anymore. You can see that character here loaded in the world completely fine, so the transfer worked fully, and the character was just on the other server. Along with that, there was another issue, because this label removal didn't just affect the transfers. It also entirely took away the special functionality of the seasonal servers in particular. Because this was now technically a normal server, you could not use ethereal gear. You could still equip it and get the normal stats from it, but you couldn't get the special effects, which meant you couldn't gather any ethereal dust, for example, so the entire purpose of these servers was gone as well. If you're enjoying this video so far, by the way, feel free to consider subscribing, and if you'd like to support me further, you can do so on Patreon. Now, I did this as a fun little test, but of course there are more impactful methods in which this could have been used as well, which other people did. For example, you're able to transfer legacy characters into fresh start servers, which could significantly affect the economy, something we can talk about a little bit later. Additionally, you can also transfer characters out of the PvP servers into normal servers with their Conqueror's gear. Now, I don't know this for sure, but I'm assuming because the special effect of the ethereal gear was disabled, the same would apply for the Conqueror's gear if you take it to another server. So I'm guessing this is very short-lived fun and more bragging rights than anything. And then after that you can't get any Conqueror's gear anymore if you can't transfer back. So probably not the greatest use of it, but still something that is possible. It also enables you to get characters with significant gold into the PvP server specifically. So a lot of things you can mess about here with, and all of that happened. People tried all of that in various different ways. It is unclear what caused this loss of labels in the first place, because you would think it's some server-side thing, but there was a small change that was applied, being that the ward perks, protection perks on Amulet now scale beyond 5% absorption again with your gear score to the normal 15%, but that was also something that was not visually being updated yet in the tooltips, which they said would be fixed in the future. So that's a good change. I'm glad that came quickly, but obviously if this change what was caused the other issues, then it was not really worth it. I'm not sure if this was the cause or something else was, but either way the problem was obviously massive. The New World Discord was spammed for multiple hours with various memes and copypastas until we actually got a response, because obviously time zone wise this was not exactly the time when most New World devs are awake and working. We eventually got a couple of replies from Tibbs, who said, "Thanks for the heads up everyone. This was actually brought up to the team by the person in charge before me. The team's aware and we will update as soon as possible." The person before apparently didn't mention that they forwarded it, but either way, it took them quite a while after that still to figure out a solution, and now the labels are back on the servers. So transferring is no longer possible, but whatever players did in the time in between has not been reverted so far. I would know this because my character that I moved stayed on the PvP server. And that is particularly interesting because this character is a factionless character which shouldn't exist on that server in the first place, something I didn't even think about beforehand. Now, while hilarious, I don't have any intention to use this character on that server because the server barely has any players to begin with, and I'd rather play it with a character that can fight other players, but it's still funny to me. what is also funny to me, but probably less funny to some others, is something else that happened on the same server, which is that previously, until yesterday, there was exactly one territory that was owned by any company on the entire map, because most people just didn't have the gold because there weren't many players on the server, there was no economy. And now it looks like somebody has brought over a loaded character and has bought out a bunch of territories at the same time. And yeah, well, the server's suddenly very purple. Now, what can Amazon do at this point? There are a few options. The first one is the obvious and most demanded one, which is a full rollback to a time earlier in the day. And realistically, especially for the PvP servers, that is probably the best play. You're gonna frustrate some players, but most players, I'm assuming, will not have played that much today if they were aware of this issue in the first place, assuming that there would possibly be a rollback. So that could work. Maybe even a rollback would cause some issues, but that would be one option that they have access to. Another option is a manual rollback of various small things that were done over time, or that were done in those few hours, but that will likely be incredibly complicated. Think, for example, of the territory control, that is gold that's already spent, rolling that back specifically and taking the territories away from the company, someone, all that seems very difficult considering the scale we're talking about here with how many people have likely done things like that. The third option would be just rolling back the PvP servers, and the fourth option would be to just ignore it all basically and just let things proceed as they are right now and say that's just the loss we're taking here. Now, I think most people will agree that the PvP servers are extremely compromised, and having characters in there that are fully maxed out at this point, this early in the season, would cause pretty significant problems in various ways, even though regrinding on those servers is very quick in comparison. Now, originally in this next part of the video, I was discussing why I think it's less of an issue for the fresh start servers that are not PvP flagged, because I think the economy between those and the older server is not as far apart as many people seem to think. However, since then we've had some news from New World directly. They made a post saying there was an issue after maintenance in which players were able to transfer to and from a seasonal world. The issue was resolved at 4 AM PT and no transfers have been possible since then. All affected characters that transferred during this period have been suspended while we investigate. All items that were seasonal world specific will be removed from non-seasonal worlds. We apologize for the inconvenience caused by this issue and thank you for your patience as we work to resolve it. Now, while I have since deleted the character because I just wanted to test if this transfer works in the first place and didn't get a suspension, Male Oreo did, and the suspension reason was this account was found to have either transferred a character to or from a new seasonal world. Account is suspended while under further investigation and correction. And Male Oreo is appealing this, saying the seasonal world was labeled as standard version during that time frame, so it wasn't the seasonal world, which is technically correct. It didn't have any seasonal effects either, so kind of awkward one to argue there either way. But realistically, I think the suspensions are not what's going to do much by itself. The bigger damage is what's happened to the economy, and I don't think that's reversible just through suspensions, because we can once again go back to the example of the territory control here, which I don't think would be reverted through this. There's still plenty of people asking for rollbacks under this very post they made for a good reason. If they are able to make server-specific rollbacks to points in time that are not too far back, then I think the best move would have been to do a rollback for the PvP servers right as they fixed things, because the time period in between where people transferred was a period where those servers weren't even PvP servers to begin with, so you couldn't get the special rewards. So a rollback during that time would be a lot less disruptive than normally, but it doesn't seem that they were able to do that, and the longer they wait, the worse it gets basically. So at that point, we don't know if we can still expect a rollback at all. It's going to be less and less likely. Overall, it definitely makes for a very rocky start to the new season, which is not really something that New World can afford right now at all. But for now, I hope you subscribe and click the bell if you enjoyed this video, and if you'd like to get early trading tips, then consider supporting me on Patreon. Thanks to all my patrons who already do exactly that. Thank you for watching, and you can see more of me over on Twitch TV/DukeSloth. DukeSloth, out.